Dude, honestly, it's so good to see you. And we're gonna it's difficult for me not to take you seriously because I mean, you're doing serious stuff. It's just that every time I think about you, I think of the crazy shit we did back in college.
Yeah,
And when you popped up in social media, and I'm like, what is he doing? What? How is
yeah,
this even possible? It's such a contrast between who we knew and who you became, kind of thing. Not saying that you were a bad kid or anything. It's just that
yeah,
I would have never imagined you being in that sort of element, right?
yeah,
But first of all, how are you? Like it's been forever. I mean, I think after Egypt, I don't think I ever saw you.
yeah. I mean, it's true. I mean, I'm good. I'm really good. Thanks for asking. It's just sometimes sometimes you realize, especially this year, a lot of time to reflect and go over the years. Um, you realize there's no real need to go back all the time and say to tell yourself, how did I get to this level? I think it's just more of a thing of realization of where you are and what you're doing, and thinking about what's still in front of you, focusing on that.
Right.
But yeah, it's a surreal thing, I must admit myself. Sometimes family get-togethers, or even my partner, when we're talking and reminiscing, sometimes it comes out and I tell her about the things that, the bad things I've done in the past. And uh and she has a hard time believing it, to the point where she says, if we met back then, I don't think we'd be together now. Um, so you see, it's complicated to put that into context, but
What
it's also
happened?
important for me to tell her these things.
So what happened to you like after college? What happened? Tell me a little bit your journey. Because I mean, and it's not as if I expected to see every
Yeah,
person every day. I mean, you understand the reality that everyone kind of grows into their element and they do what they
yeah,
have to do and stuff, and life, you know, uh,
yeah,
kicks in. But time to time, I mean, we're such a small little bubble here, right? In Montreal. I mean, you're gonna
yeah,
eventually run into some people somewhere. Either, well, obviously later on there was university, so there was a lot of those kids there. But eventually,
yeah.
you're gonna run into people, and you were just nowhere. And many times we were asking with the guys, we're like, whatever happened to Aram? So what happened? Okay, tell me, like college finishes, what happens to Aram?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. It's just a case of, you're at a stage in life where you've gone to, college, and now you're looking at university and trying to figure out who you are, what are you going to do, and planning out the next sort of phase, the chapters, the what's ahead. And I struggled with that. I did. I university went well, got the grades more or less, nothing outstanding, but managed to get to a level where, you're in a good position. But there's a lot of things that come with that. You're in a good position, uh, and then you need to look at the job market. So that for me was, sort of a flash of reality. After university, didn't get the job that I was hoping for. There was a big sort of disconnect there. You're studying international business, that's what I studied, and then you get into this tech company, which I knew nothing about, and that's your first job. So it's a division. You study that, but then you're getting into something else. I struggled in the sense that by the time after that job, finally I got into what I wanted to do: international business, consulting, expansion and advising. And I realized even that's not what I want to do. So
Right.
then that's scary. You studied all those years, and then you finally get into what you consider your dream job. And then you realize, oh, that's a scary thought. And I felt really almost like in a concerned state, and it affects everything that you do.
For sure.
So that put me into a bit of a, not necessarily a tailspin, but you're not happy. You're isolating yourself more, and you're not sort of, it affects you basically. So I think that's the hard thing to come to terms with.
You're not the only one, right? Because, and I've said on many podcasts before and other conversations that I have, there's something, and I'm not saying our education system here is flawed, but there's something about it that
Yeah,
needs to be re-examined because, and you're not
yeah,
the only one. I was in the same situation where I reached university and I was like,
yeah,
okay, now what? At least you got to study. You thought you knew what you wanted and you studied it, right? Then later on, you
yeah,
realize that once you got into the environment, you thought, well, maybe this is not for me. So that you started
yeah,
questioning everything that brought you up until that period, right? Until the point.
yeah,
But I got into university and I didn't even know what to do. I was
yeah,
lost entirely. I was like, okay, what am I doing now? To the point where I had no clue about programs, about future, nothing.
yeah,
So I just took, what are they called? Electives, whatever, in politics.
yeah,
And I just found a niche that was interesting to me. I was like, okay, this is actually very interesting. I mean, maybe I'll just
yeah,
take this program, right? And that's what happened. But it's funny because even when I was studying, I kind of convinced myself that there's no way in hell that I'll find a
yeah.
job working in politics. Like, what do you do?
What's
Like,
called? Yeah,
I found it interesting. It was an interesting topic, and we learned so much. And the professors were
yeah,
experienced individuals, and it just happened by luck that I fell into politics and had a career, right, in politics. But you're not
yeah,
the only one, and I mean, there's so many kids, at that time, like, you're in your mid-20s, you're looking forward
yeah,
to, like, this entire life, and then,
yeah,
like, you realize, okay, I took a wrong turn somewhere because this is really far from what I wanted to do.
yeah. Exactly. Yeah,
So how did that bring you to going to Africa? Because we're going to talk about it. I find it very interesting what you're involved in, and we're going to talk a little
yeah,
bit about the organization and everything that you're doing. But how do you go from, this cosmopolitan city, Montreal, with, all the
yeah.
prospects, and you're right next to the U.S. if ever you want to branch up or whatever, and then you just leave all that behind and you go to Africa.
Before I went to Africa, I spent close to 2 years in Chile, about a year and a half, and I was doing some consulting work there as well.
Okay.
And that life was in many ways, surreal for different reasons. I was living on the beach, nice apartment right on the beach. I mean, for you can't get better than that. But again, something missing, a void. It felt I'm still chasing something that doesn't exist in those terms. So, I just came to the conclusion that well, I can't continue living like this either. I mean, everything is good. You're in a good surrounding, weather, circumstances, and a close circle of friends. I did manage to make good friends there as well. But it feels like living the life of a retired man. There's no, your set of ambitions. You don't have a push, and I felt that flame is sort of dying, dwindling as well. So I felt, well, this is not working as well. So I need to go back. But what I learned from there is, and I'll explain it this way. Maybe it'll make more sense. I don't think I would have been able to go directly from Montreal to Africa. I needed something in between. And Chile is not quite like Canada, so it's still a developing, an emerging market. So and then you can see there was a jump, there was a gap between Canada and Chile in terms of the social ramifications, and you can see poverty even heightened in the streets, and all the educational crisis that they're going through, riots on the streets. So that opened my eyes a bit more than before. So it allowed me to understand that if I go to Sierra Leone or any other sort of even more developing nations, I need to take a step. So that prepared me for it in many ways. Well, how do you go about Sierra Leone? It's an interesting thing. It doesn't happen overnight. And for me, what happened was the realization that you need to sacrifice something too. Your family, your friends. You need to leave that behind. And then if you're prepared to do that, what are your options? In my case, having studied international business, I didn't have the background of development or environmental protection. So it meant that I needed to consider something even more, uh, you know, junior or something, introductory in that sense. And that's where the good fortunes come in. But even then, so what happened was I was looking for options when I was in Montreal, and I came across this opportunity in Tanzania. And I went for it. The interviews went well. Uh, an offer did come through, and I accepted the offer. But then a week later, they called me back and said the budget, uh, the budget that your position would have been funded from has collapsed. So we don't have any funding for you. So we can't bring you on board.
Right.
And that's sort of that's another realization actually, because at the same time I had looked at Sierra Leone and I saw the advert online. I clicked on it, I read, it looked interesting, but the backstory of the country, Ebola and the war, and I mean, it's not positive. And then someone who I didn't know much about the history other than those 2 points. So what I did is I bookmarked the link and just parked it, and I parked it for a week, 2 weeks, and then while I'm sleeping, your mind is going back to it. Why are you not? Why are you so scared about it? And then that Tanzania thing put everything into perspective. Basically, if I was willing to accept a role in a more commercial, more developed environment, what's wrong with taking a job in a country where help is most needed? So that's the relationship. Once I came to terms with that, I went back to the advert. I said, well, you need to approach this more from a rational perspective. You're making the assumptions that it's not going to work out, the environment is unstable. So I said the least I could do is just go for an interview, have a chat, and see where that might lead me. And that's how it all happened.
Wow.
Uh,
So,
it's
so, so just to put everyone that's watching or listening up to speed, we're talking about the Takugama Chimpanzee Sanctuary. Um, uh, I mean, I don't know what interest you had in
yeah,
nature and its preservation and specifically this species, but
yeah.
what exactly were you applying for? Like just developing this sanctuary, or what role did you go there for?
So it was for the program manager's position, basically running the day to day and the projects, the expansion, the vision, and that's something too. I mean, it's a good point you raised, and I remember when the conversation started really becoming serious, and I started realizing, wow, I might actually move to Sierra Leone. I remember as I was happy, I was really happy, but then a part of me was also embarrassed. Um, if I told my friends or family that I've got this job at a sanctuary, at a chimp sanctuary, to me it felt embarrassing. It just felt like people might perceive that as you're working in a zoo, or you're working with animals. It feels like I was my harshest critic, in the sense that I was projecting the voices in my head and saying, well, you're throwing away your education, you're going at a chimp sanctuary, what are you going to do financially, all these questions. But then I had done my research and I saw the potential of the place. And it's just, I mean, it is all about rescuing the chimps in the country. But I mean, now that I've had almost 4 years of working with them, I realize that it's not about the chimps; it's about the people, because it's the people inflicting the harm on the chimps and the environment. So in order to bring about change, you need to work with the people, and
Right.
that's where it gets interesting. When you're working with people, you realize that there's a whole ecosystem of things that you need to consider for change to come through, and that's advocacy, that's livelihood projects, that's an education program, ecotourism to a certain degree, policy change, lobbying. So it's much more than a sanctuary,
Right.
and that's sort of the work I had done to inform myself. But when you get into it, you realize, well, there's really nothing to be embarrassed about. It's something that, and I'll say it maybe this way, George, it's the best decision I've done in my life.
Yeah.
I found my passion there, and later on I found my partner, and that's like those are the the foundations of happiness,
Of
isn't
course,
it?
it's incredible because, and I've had this conversation with other people, our age, who kind of followed that pattern that we're boxed into. Right? You're brought up and you're told, look, you got to go to school, you got to get good grades, you got to get a good
Yeah,
education so you can get a good job and be successful. Right? And everyone is kind of in that rat race where maybe they're happy, maybe they're not, or maybe they don't know what else is out there for them, right? And
yeah,
I had the same conversation with another friend of mine who was in the car industry, and he had a top position and a lot of money. The dealership was doing well and stuff. And then from one day to the next, well, I don't know if it was one day. Obviously, there was some sort of reflection there. He left that.
yeah,
He left all that behind to go run a like a fruits and vegetable business, right?
yeah,
That's what his family was in. And he was telling me the criticism I got and the misunderstanding in people's faces was incredible. He wasn't expecting that, right? And he struggled for a while because he felt like I'm being judged, I'm being criticized. Is this the right decision? Am I falling victim to everyone else's opinion rather than what I
yeah,
believe in? And the truth of the fact is that he's really successful. Like the guy, he's opening up, like he has a second store, they're opening up a third. Like he's all over the place. The guy, he's doing super well
mm,
because similar to you,
yeah,
you find that passion uh,
yeah,
becomes the driving force, right? In what you do, and you really don't care about what people think or the opinions that
yeah,
other people make of you, as long as you're in that comfort zone where you know that one, you are you're doing what you want and you're fulfilled with what you're doing. What does it matter, right?
that's exactly it. I mean, the thing on my side, that I was wrong basically. You're always going to have some people questioning your decisions and some criticism that come with that. I think that's normal and under any circumstances. But the part that I was wrong, the close people that I felt were questioning my decision or were not being supportive, they were actually very supportive. It's just that I had blocked them off and I didn't really, because I had made up my mind that it'll be sort of received in the wrong way.
Hmm.
Had blocked them out, and it turns out now that I've had conversations with them, family and friends, it turns out I was wrong in that situation
Right, right.
because of maybe societal, the way expectations are set on you. I think that pressured me to believe that, yeah, there's no way they'll sort of understand my decision or they'll criticize it.
So you don't even talk to them. You just block them out right away. You don't even care about their opinion. You're like, I'm not going to talk to them. They're probably going to be against it. And
Yeah, it's just it happened that way, and that's the part where I wish I could have done differently. But in hindsight, now that I'm in a situation where I know that what I've done is the right decision, it's easier to talk about it now. So I think I think also, I mean, talking to various people, I try to also tell them that um, you know not necessarily inspire others, but to tell them that if you're unsure about a decision, you're naturally hesitating between a couple of options. The best way to get to the bottom of that is take more of a calculated risk in the sense that at least try it out. Try it out. Give yourself time to see if this possibility makes sense for you. If it doesn't, the thing that we're always sort of led to believe is once you take that decision, you're stuck going down that path forever, which is not necessarily true.
yeah.
You can always adjust, and that's the part that people don't realize, and they don't pursue some of these, dream type, adventures.
Yeah,
But
it's incredible. So when you're looking at this opportunity, are you thinking I'm gonna go? It seems like a good mission. I'm gonna help them develop. Do you understand the consequences and all these other players and all these other things that are attached to this cause, or are you just thinking, okay, this is an interesting opportunity. I can go make a difference. I'll help them develop. I'll use my experience to help the sanctuary grow and to promote its mission. but are you aware of everything else in that ecosystem? Like you mentioned before, the policy, the politicians, the society, the community, in general, the cause, the environmental conservation and animal conservation. Like, do you have this understanding?
Well, it's difficult. I mean, that's the thing that I'm still adjusting many ways. It's easy to talk about the achievements and the impact that I've done, but also I've come to realize even after all these years of working, there's still things that they're still coming up and learning and trying to see how that fits in, not just in Sierra Leone, but in West Africa and try to get some of these proven concepts, methodologies scaled up and to see when for example when you're talking about carbon schemes and national park protection and I mean all of that sounds good, but then none of that is possible unless the communities, the people realize what are their essential requirements and all of that. So you need to really start by the basics.
Mhm.
And learning the people in that environment takes time as well. You just, I mean, it's just the impression that a white man from the Western upbringing is coming to Africa, and you don't want to give that impression out as well. So that's the thing. You need to try to communicate with the locals and make them understand that you're not there for any um, incentives. It's just more creating a basis where you're trying to improve their lives, and by improving their lives without much interference in terms of this is the way you should be leading your life, but
Right.
provide concrete examples of how to provide education for their kids and putting in place things that necessarily replace their current habits. Like some of the people that I've met, even the basic fundamental examples, for example, they go out into the national parks and cut down the trees, and they're doing that because they don't have any other means of providing for their family. The energy, heating, and cooking, and that's what they need. But if you explain to them what harm they're causing, they all of a sudden, even without much education, they understand that their kids down the line will struggle more than they are struggling.
Yeah.
So it's putting it into context and understanding that. In terms of the more technical aspects, George, is complicated. I mean, we're still talking about West Africa, where the history is well documented, and there's corruption, and um, there's bigger issues at stake. So to come in and to navigate from through those sort of landscapes, it takes years, and
For sure.
still learning that. It's an ongoing process. But as you mentioned, a lot of the things I think from the international background, the development side, getting funding and setting in place, the foundations of development and budgeting and analysis and monitoring and evaluation, those became very relevant. And those I relied on those parts, and then that sort of bought me time to learn more about. I knew nothing about chimps, like nothing.
Yeah.
All I knew was they're our closest ancestors, but other than that, I didn't know anything about chimps.
Yeah.
That comes to you over the course of the years. It comes to you, and
So tell me, how does this whole thing come to existence? Like, what's the backstory of this sanctuary?
the man who founded the sanctuaries is, I mean, he's beyond inspirational. And his story is also, I mean, his story is the one we should be really talking about, because without him, none of this would be sort of possible. He's a Sri Lankan origin. He's born and raised in Sri Lanka, and his mother used to be a teacher, and at some point in the 70s and late 70s, the government of Sierra Leone, there were bilateral relations, and they were looking for science teachers to come and make an impact and teach the kids about engineering and all of the syllabus basically. And he came with his mother at the age of 17, and he was an accountant, and he was sort of this man. And there's similarities between both of us, and I think that's what sort of bonded us. He used to be living life in the fast lane as well, fast cars, chasing girls, and just like you told me earlier, it's like I didn't think you'd get involved in this industry one day. His parents and his friends thought the same. I mean, He was an accountant, no formation in wildlife conservation or environmental protection. But how he became sort of attached and connected to this world is him and his wife. One day they were in the provinces, traveling in one of the communities in Sierra Leone, and they came across a chimp tied to a tree, a baby chimp, like um, 2 years old, some in that sort of age group, and uh, and he hesitated, but then he knew that he needs to do something, you know. And the interesting part is at that point, and I suppose we all have an option, right? So he was presented in his mind with two options: either you walk away from that scene and you do nothing, or you do something without having any knowledge of chimps or whatsoever, and you figure it out. And that's what he did, and he's been figuring it out ever since. There's a lot of things that you know us, people from the outside, including myself, you don't know about, but then figuring out is not as difficult as long as you've got the will and the commitment. So what he did is he purchased a chimp. He took the chimp home and then he raised it at his house. And then next thing you know, he was finding more chimps needing rescuing. So at one point, he had 6 chimps living in his house. And then chimps, after 4 or 5 years old, they become bigger, and they're troublemakers. They're like they're chewing your clothes. They need a lot of food, and they're aggressive, and they're strong. And so that's when the idea of establishing a chimp sanctuary came to mind, and that's how it started. I mean,
Was this common practice at that time? I mean, what year are we talking about? We're talking about 90s now.
so when you first rescued the chimp that I mentioned, 1989. So and then you're talking about a time in it's a common practice basically. Even the current president of Sierra Leone, when he was in charge of the army, he had 2 chimps in his compound.
Mhm.
And it's basically, well, you can look at it a few ways. It's a sign of prestige. You've got an exotic animal, which a lot of other sort of countries have. People raising tigers in their houses, and so it's that coupled with you know ignorance, I suppose, to a level. So, but it's not uncommon. A lot of people had chimps in there as pets, and that's one of the reasons why chimps are being hunted and raised as pets. There's a lot of money involved into too. So trafficking, when you look at trafficking, and yeah, so he had 6 of them living in his house. It's at some point you need to do something. You can't continue. The neighbors complaining. I remember he tells me stories, like unreal stories, of he needed to take the chimps out in the forest, for fresh air and that sort of stuff. And he's driving them basically, and people can see 2 semi grown chimps in the car in the passenger seat, and
The belt
so
on, the seat belt.
yeah, seatbelt, and the chimps riding in the passenger seat. So yeah, it's but he didn't ask for this life either. He sort of got sucked into it, and then the
Right.
more he got into it, he realized that the country has a deeper, there's a bigger issue at stake that you need to solve.
Yeah, because I was doing some research just to prepare, and there were no laws for this before. And essentially, because of the work that was done through the sanctuary, now this is an illegal practice in Sierra Leone.
Yeah, we've done some good works, and we've made some strides in the last year. So one of the projects that I worked on 2 years ago was a lot of lobbying with the government and working very closely with them, and they saw the value of the chimp as and I'll get into it a bit more later, but they saw the value, and they declared the chimp as the country's national animal in the face of tourism.
Mm.
It's significant because then you're sending a message to other nations, especially regional countries, that you can actually make a difference by instituting policies. And once you've got those policies in place, then you can add complementary pieces to it. And one of the things we're doing now is working on sort of changing the 1972 Wildlife Act. So 1972, George, imagine how outdated that thing is. And I had to look at it. I've been working on it, and the law says to this date you're allowed to kill 2 chimps a year, and the penalty is less than $1 for that. So I mean, we still have a lot of work ahead of us, but those pieces become easier when you've got policy in place and the government begins to see the value. The other thing is we've been fortunate now that they see the value, uh, because if you position the image of the chimp, in the right way, then that leads to job creation. You can build an ecotourism circuit around it. People can come and visit and see that, uh, also the natural habitat. But then you can also, by clearly spelling out and sort of highlighting the links between chimps in general and the environment. For instance, the chimp's natural habitat is the forest. The forest and the trees are responsible for the water catchments. It's the roots and the trees that are forming the water basins, and the water is responsible for food security and the welfare of the people. So if you sort of make that connection and convey the message at the highest levels of government and get funding in place to protect the catchments and the forests and prevent deforestation and establish those links to minimize poaching, and not just the chimps but all wildlife species in the country,
Mhm.
then you're also improving the welfare of the communities and the country as a whole. Then you're contributing to GDP, and you're creating secondary and tertiary industries.
Right.
So that's the ecosystem. Everything is basically interconnected.
Tell me, because this basically was all created before the Civil War over there in the early '90s, correct?
It was created, yeah, 1995 during the war.
So how did that political instability have an impact? I mean, let's talk about that, but also I want to get later about the current political situation, and
Yeah,
if it's any better or if there's still those challenges ahead. But at that time when the sanctuary is being put into place, you have this uprising that's going on in Sierra Leone. What kind of impact does that have?
well, it's huge. I mean, if you talk to Bala is the founder.
Mhm.
It's remarkable. I mean, there's books written about him, and he's won very. I mean, he's won numerous awards. But the thing that sets him aside is his will and his perseverance. Um, the context of the war started in the north, in Kono, in those areas, the mining areas, and it trickled down to Freetown slowly. But during the first couple of years of the war, not a lot of people thought the war would actually reach Freetown,
Right.
and they all sort of went about their ways, and they said, well, it's not going to affect us. It seems to be more of a regional conflict. Uh, to go even further than that, I mean, you can make a case, actually more than the case, that the war was manufactured by Liberia and Charles Taylor at the time. He basically created Fode Sanko in the rebel movement, and that's how it all started. So not many people sort of grasp that this might come to Freetown, but it did. But 1995, for him specifically, there was a need. There was a need to establish something because he couldn't raise the chimps at the house anymore. So he needed to do something. He managed to get 40,000 euros from EU, based in Freetown, and that's what started the sanctuary. He didn't realize that it's going to get chaotic, and it did. And the sanctuary was ransacked twice by the rebels. The rebels infiltrated and they looted, and but they didn't do anything to the chimps. In fact, when they came over to the sanctuary, and surprisingly, the relationship with the founder and the rebels was good. And I mean good in the sense that the rebels said, well, we don't have any issues with the animals. Our issues are with the people. And these are people chopping the hands of people in the neighboring villages, but they didn't do anything to the chimps. All they did is they stole the items from the sanctuary, medicine, and that sort of stuff, and they left the place intact. The interesting thing is, and this is where Bala had to play the politics. He had to play both sides. on one side, ECOMOG, the regional sort of forces, Nigerians included, and the rebels. And the rebels were key for him because he needed the rebels' protection to get milk into the sanctuary for the chimps.
Right.
And on a couple of instances, the rebels smuggled in milk for the chimps. So you can see how he was using both sides. But I mean, talk about volatile periods. I mean, sometimes it's difficult to understand the image of what Freetown looked like during those days. I mean, people being executed at checkpoints to a point where he was evacuated to there's a Radisson, in the capital, which they've got bunkers and things outside the hotel. At one point, towards the end of the war, there was one payphone, and that's the only one available where you can call his family, because his family, they evacuated him to the UK. So every day or every other day, he used to go outside Radisson and run towards the payphone. Well, there's bullets flying nearby. Go call his family, go back to the bunker, and then repeat the same thing every day. So yeah, the war eventually did hit Freetown hard, and I mean, fighting on the streets as well. So not the ideal time to establish a sanctuary, but sometimes when you've got a vision and funding was secured, you go ahead with it.
How's the situation now?
I mean, it's completely different. To a point when people ask me what Sierra Leone is look like, the first thing I say, this country doesn't get the recognition it deserves. And when I say country, I mean the people. I mean, one of the nicest sort of, natural intrinsic kindness, to the point you question yourself sometimes, like, are they being kind because they want something in return? Or you question it, but it's not the case. These are people who've seen hard times. Other nations have as well. But I suppose factor in the poverty and especially in the last year, the amount of devastation that they've seen back to back and in close sort of intervals. It's remarkable, the resiliency that they have. To a point in 2017 when I went, I went. I arrived in Freetown in May, and we had a big landslide. A couple of months later, 5 months later, August, and well, close to 3,000 people died. So you see, and when you look at the people, they just pick up the pieces. Let's continue, and it's that sort of mentality. But there's progress, George. And it's progress in the right way. We've got a government now. The opposition party came into power in 2018. A smooth transition, no violence, nothing, and they've made some real changes. So they've got a free education now, primary level and secondary level. It's monumental. They're working on a lot of new initiatives, building the roads and ramping up the institutions. So I think they're on the right track, but sometimes it needs more than a couple of years of stability, because we're getting close to elections now, if the opposition now comes into power again, then they might say, well, that's not our priority, and then sort of a reset will happen. So it's an interesting one, but the country doesn't get the credit it deserves, and I can say that from a visual standpoint, it is one of the most beautiful countries. And then, so when I used to go on my day offs to the beach. I used to be selfishly happy that I've got the entire beach to myself. But then you're involved in these ecotourism projects, and you're working on rebranding the country, and you say to yourself, well, if this becomes successful, people will start coming, and you'll lose this privacy that you've got. But can't be selfish. It's like you gotta keep pushing.
Tell me about, obviously, I mean, clearly locally there's a huge amount of impact that has come out of that sanctuary, both obviously in favor of wildlife preservation, but also in terms of the governance, the governance and the political changes as well, that have been
Yeah.
the monumental changes that you've mentioned. How is whatever you're doing, what kind of impact do you have, like in other countries that are also um, working in this sort of trajectory?
We're getting to a point where there's a lot more sort of inquiries coming in whether we can replicate some of the stuff that we've done in Sierra Leone elsewhere. Um, I had an interesting call today, and with a big consulting firm in the U.S. Uh, but there's no real reason to mention names, but the conversations that I had is on, for example, on the education side. We're working on over the years, we've developed our own environmental workbook. It's got 13 lessons, and we've been working with 26 schools implementing that workbook. And earlier this year, we reached a new sort of milestone. We're working with the Minister of Education to begin integrating that workbook into the national curriculum. So kids at the primary level, to begin with, will learn more about the importance of hygiene, One Health, the implications of zoonotic diseases like COVID, the effects of deforestation, and then conservation more at an in-depth level, where in the past it's been non-existent. So to have that level of impact, it's encouraging, and I'm just proud of the team to have reached that level. But what that does is now all of a sudden you've got a concept that people are becoming interested, especially to begin with at the regional level, because you've got chimps in Liberia and Guinea-Bissau. Because you've got a proven sort of content and curriculum already in place, you can easily package that and then begin implementing that in those neighboring countries. But to take that even further, what we've done on the grounds in terms of our work, we work with in 3 of the 4 national parks in the country. And one of the things we do in those national parks, we identify, hire, and train local community eco guards, and they're basically like rangers, and they patrol the areas. We provide them with training, reconnaissance, and tactical training, communications, and all of that. And they become sort of accountable for those areas, but they're also collecting data, and in terms of what species they're encountering, what are the areas that need immediate intervention and reforestation. So what we've done is that training mechanism of those guards, people are now in neighboring countries, they're asking if we can provide similar training and create those rangers in their countries as well.
Right.
So some of these things are replicable, and you can scale them up as well. So that's encouraging to see that some of the work that we're doing is actually not just paying dividends in Sierra Leone, but it can help other countries as well.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that there's the political will, like you said, because I mean, you can come in and have any idea you want, but the minute that you're getting all these obstacles, especially from government, it could be a little bit tougher, right? To get through, and the fact that there's that door that is open that allows you
Yeah.
to kind of navigate those waters, and you get the proper help to push through those channels. Obviously, makes a big difference, right? And that's why I was asking, like in the neighboring countries, is there that kind of will to make that difference?
It's different. I mean, governments and especially in West Africa, there are different stages of development and sort of gaining they're building their industries because of different reasons, because of interests, because of available natural resources and that sort of thing. But the good thing about Sierra Leone, I mean, these things, I mean, they haven't been easy. I'll leave it at that. It requires a lot of pushing, a lot of negotiation at that government ministerial level to make them understand that if we don't intervene now, then you'll have nothing left to base on your economic policies on. So it is in your best interest to act now. And then if you look at, for example, countries like Sierra Leone, when I mentioned the landslide or any natural disasters, traditionally they've been focusing on sort of the aftermath, the emergency response, right? But the missing component is the prevention, and prevention is it costs much less, George, than coming up and and sort of reparation and fixing things. It's much less, and it's ridiculously easy to do.
Mhm.
I mean, it doesn't even cost a fraction of it. All you need to do is put in place mechanisms where people understand directions, provide support wherever needed, and some light infrastructure whenever possible.
Mhm.
But that's what they've ignored in the past. Like you look at uh, the landslide is a perfect case because it's smaller on the scale in terms of you know lives lost and the impact. But still, 3,000 people died,
Yeah.
and a lot of money came pouring in from other governments and NGOs and donations, a lot. And I'm not even sure to this point, to this date, um, if that money was used in the right way. I mean, I know that to a point, procurement came in and they took a lot of that money, and who knows where that money ended up. But 50 million, I mean, we're talking about a lot of money.
Mhm.
But for preparedness, all you need is, I mean, we've been doing the same sort of work on a national scale with budgets less than a million. So it's possible. You just need to, um, and I know why the government does that. I mean, they know that money will pour in, and they're fine with that. But our conscience doesn't allow us to go by that way. We need to set the bar high, and it's ethical, right? I mean, we've got responsibility to donors. We can't go about doing that. So that's it's on our moral conscience, I guess.
How does how does the funding work? It's mostly NGOs and government, or I mean, is there any revenue, any sources of revenue from the sanctuary itself?
Yeah, the sanctuary itself, we do get some grants. There's not too many grants out there that provide funding for animal welfare, but there are some, and we do get money from them. But we've expanded now, and the projects, for example, working on now an ecotourism project. We work in about 70 plus communities, and we've got about 15,000 direct annual beneficiaries a year. So the projects that we do, we've got livelihood support, because you can't tell people that, well, stop cutting down the trees and stop, hunting the wildlife and thus you need to replace that behavior with something, an alternative livelihood. So what we do in parts of the country, for example, we've got a project in a mangrove area where there are oysters on the roots of the mangroves, and we've been working with 40, almost 50 women now to sustainably harvest the oysters and empower them and teach them about how everything is interconnected and create jobs. And that project is working well now. But if we scale that project, for example, and we create, smoked oysters and package them and sell them to markets in Freetown and possibly exports down the line, then you create sustainability,
Mhm.
and those revenues will go back into the operation so that finances whatever they need, equipments, boats, money to nurse mangroves and do planting around those areas. So that's one example. We rely on grants. So this ecotourism project that I'm working on, it's basically in 4 districts, and we want to establish eco lodges and get people to come and visit. And again, the money generated will go back into. So it becomes almost like a circular economy. So you're creating activities. The activities are done by the rangers in the case of hiking, bird watching, and those salaries are paid by the guests. So again, back into the operation. So it's a combination of things. Also looking into merchandising, cross-sector partnership, CSR program. Um, at the sanctuary, for example, last year we constructed a new area. It's a spa area where people go for massages. It's basically expanding the portfolio, and it's a combination. And the biggest piece that's missing is we don't get any funding from the government. So it's a big gap.
Yeah, but and that's why I'm asking, because from what you're saying, it seems that you've opened those channels. There is support. People are listening to you. You've implemented changes in the law. Now you're looking at the other bill, and it's strange that these partners that you're already working with
Yeah.
aren't supporting you financially.
Yeah, that's the thing. We're hoping to change that, but change comes in small incremental pieces.
Right.
That 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 declaration of the chimp as the country's national animal, it's a considering everything, historically in the country, it's a huge step. So based on that, now we can start demanding other things, but
Right.
that's a big component.
How what kind of impact do you think you guys have like at an international stage? Like, I mean, you've proven your expertise locally. There's countries, neighboring countries that are looking at what you're doing so that they can kind of copy paste it in their jurisdictions. What's happening internationally with this specific cause and in general, just wildlife preservation, and how much role do you guys have specifically in that?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's gaining more traction. I mean, from a personal standpoint, I left Freetown about 6 months ago. While I was working at the sanctuary, I met my partner, and she visited the sanctuary one day while I was working, um, and at the end of just before she was leaving, she asked me out, and I freaked out. I had this sort of worried face that I was so focused on what I had to do that day that I didn't even think that this lady would ask me out. And when she did, I was completely puzzled. Not because I wasn't interested. It's because your mind, it's got so many other things lurking in the background, and you're getting asked here. Anyways, eventually things. I mean, not today. We went out a couple of times, and she eventually moved with me at the sanctuary. So we're both living in the jungle. She stayed. We lived together there for 2 years. She volunteered for Takugama. She volunteered for other women organizations. And then towards the end, she realized that there's something missing in her personal life. She needed a change. She's a senior lawyer, and she wasn't developing her own career. And I understood that. So we looked at our options, and we said maybe it makes sense for us to go to the UK, and that's what happened. She got a job at the University of Oxford, and I realized, well, this could be an opportunity for both of us. She can advance her career, and I can move to the UK, where there's a lot of interest there, and specifically to Sierra Leone, because Sierra Leone used to be a British colony,
Oh, yeah.
and there are a lot of conservation-based organizations in London and Oxford, Cambridge, a lot of interest to support and contribute to the cause, but also the proximity to the media. If I'm in Oxford, and I'm linking up with these organizations, my presence there alone would sort of trigger an interest, and the fact that I'll be going back and forth. I mean, I'm still going to go to Freetown at least 3-4 times a year. It creates a connection through me and then sets that link between the UK and Sierra Leone. But the other part of your question is, George, I think it's in the best interest of not just UK organizations and the government, but all countries, for the sake of climate change, because it's got a ripple effect, and for several reasons. And I know that the deforestation rates in Sierra Leone are incredibly high. There's only about less than 5% primary forest left, and there's huge illegal logging. The Chinese are, through local communities, they're illegally logging inside the national parks, and they're shipping the lumber back to China. So that's going to run out at some point. So once they're through with Sierra Leone, they're going to go into neighboring countries, and eventually it'll have an effect where they're going from country to country, and the natural resources are diminishing. That's got effects on the exports, but also creates effects on demand from Western countries as well. And at some point, if you can't offset the emissions anymore, then that's contributing to global warming. So that's the effect. So people think, it's a small country in West Africa. I mean, what can we realistically change there? But that's where the mindset needs to change. The perception is that, I mean, yes, there are a lot of challenges, but we alone have changed a lot. So imagine if we had more support, more funding, more knowledge of what this entails, then we can do a lot more.
It seems to me, and I mean, it's not. I mean, it's not new, but Africa in general, as a continent, has been kind of neglected, right? Taken advantage of for obviously its resources, and it just feels like uh, the easy solution is just to keep doing that, right? It's like, yeah, it's Africa. Don't worry about it. Well, like it seems as though they're playing on a different playing field. And there's a lot of studies now demonstrating that the next phase uh, of social, political, and just economic emergence is going to come out of
Yeah.
Africa. So I'm just curious to know how much protection is going to be offered to stuff that you're like that you're involved in, right? Rather than just to go the path of, I don't want to say Western societies, but just in general developing nations.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate, isn't it? I mean, and it's by design that Africa is always kept at in that sort of model. Because if you keep Africa in that sense, then there's a lot of profits that come out of it, and that's by design. But Africa has, I mean, it's got a lot of potential. The landscape is conducive to a lot of things, both from an agricultural point of perspective, which I mean, 50% of Sierra Leone's GDP is still agriculture. So it's a big component, and it's still got a lot more potential in terms of doing new innovative ways of harvesting crops and that sort of thing. But it's got potential for other things as well. Like when you talk about renewable energy, and combining that with the ecotourism potential, the beauties of the beaches. I mean, Sierra Leone has one of the richest biodiversities in the world. So you've got the mountains, the river streams, the islands, but also on the countryside, you've got a lot of the species, right? The wildlife side. Those are all revenue generating possible mechanisms. Which, I mean, take the case of Rwanda. Rwanda's managed to create entire industries on gorillas alone, and they've done that, and they've used funding from that to create tech industries. And now you've got the automotive sector there. Volkswagen has a plant there. When you look at the mobile technology, and it's based on innovation, and that model in the case of Sierra Leone, and we're hoping to do a similar type of approach. I mean, different sort of pieces in place, but creating that sort of um, you know potential jumping point where you have innovation at the core, and with free education now being provided to the youth, you can generate a lot more ideas and keep pushing the boundaries of what Sierra Leone and Africa should be.
Right.
Because I can tell you, I mean, I've come across a lot of kids with no sort of high levels of education who are, I mean, they're whiz kids basically, and it doesn't take much. All you need is a bit of nurturing support, and show these kids that it is possible to make a difference in that sort of way, and you can actually create either an entrepreneurial business, a concept, and make a living out of this. Whereas traditionally the country doesn't have scientists, people working in conservation, renewable energy. It's either agriculture, fisheries, or that's it. There's not much else.
Right.
Whereas if you develop that, then human capacity, intellectual, the side comes into, and that's what we need. It's a shame that it's neglected, and we're trying to change that, and it's not easy.
Tell me about the challenges that are left ahead of you guys. Obviously, you're mentioning all these changes, societal, political, economic.
Yeah,
What are the goals now that are in place?
for us, it's as you keep growing, and as an organization, you're putting yourself in a good situation because a lot of people are sort of depending on you, and you're doing good in that sense. You're improving lives. You're providing access to health and clean energy and food. So that's what we're striving to do, and we're being fortunate that so far it's been productive. But at the same time, when you've got that many dependents depending on you, it puts a lot of, I wouldn't say pressure, but fiscal responsibility as well. Where is this funding going to come from? So funding continues to be a challenge, and I don't know. Sometimes you depending of the moment of the year. We just had a couple of days ago. We received a grant from the European Union. It's basically a 3-year project at 3.2 million for the protection of one of the national parks. So it's a sizable grant. But when you look at the components of the grant, 3 years, 3.2, it's really nothing, George. When you look at how much you need to do in that park,
Right.
and what you need to deliver, it becomes very small, and that money will disappear quickly. 3 years is nothing. So that's the issue. Constantly looking ahead, trying to see how to make this whole thing sustainable, because we're going to run into issues, and I know that, and that's what is always, it's a concern of mine. The bigger we grow, more funding or more sort of we're exposing ourselves as well from that point of view. But I think it goes back to what I said earlier, introducing components that are driving revenues, and then you create that sustainable thing. But that's also a thing. The second thing, I guess, challenges. We briefly talked about it earlier. Is the government? Is this period of stability going to last? When there's stability, even in short times. The president now is coming to an end his term. 4 years. That also quickly come and goes. And during stability, even in that short time, we've done a lot. But is the next administration going to be as willingness to cooperate? Are we going to have this level of stability? Are they going to have the same appetite to contribute to the cause, the environmental side? What are their interests? Are they?
But let me ask you something, because it's interesting that you're bringing it up. What kind of government relations do you guys do? Do you guys only work with the government, or are you building and trying to maintain relationships with all parties that are in government, whether they're in opposition? Because eventually, like you're saying, maybe there will come a time that the people governing now won't be there, and the opposition will be in their place. So, wouldn't it be beneficial to just have relations with everyone?
Yeah, that's in a sense that's what we do.
Yeah.
We can't predict the future, but we can shape the future by having as many relationships on the ground.
Yeah.
The other thing is, the approach should be an approach where you're not looking at stakeholders or people as much as which parties they're part of. You're looking at how many people, or how can I expand my reach and reach out to as many people as possible, and not that it goes beyond which political party they're in, because even the opposition, even if they've got differentiating sort of viewpoints or philosophies, there is one underlying thing that sort of links us all up, and that's money.
Mm-hmm.
If you generate money for the country, and you happen to be doing it in a sustainable way, then you've got their interest, and we've found a way to do that. So that gives us a lot of negotiation power.
Nice. Is there other organizations like yours involved in wildlife preservation and environmental activity?
There's smaller organizations, and there's one big one that I can think of that they're doing good work, but those are the two organizations, and that's a problem in itself. You look at Kenya, for example. Kenya has all the big players there. You got WWF, Greenpeace, all these big institutions that have deep pockets, and of course they're all attracted. There's a reason why they're there. It's not just the biodiversity. It's because there's commercial interest there. We don't have that, so we're trying to change that approach for a couple of reasons. Not to attract that commercial interest. We're changing the approach to get awareness. So people, for me, one of the things I got excited, for example, when you reached out and you wanted to ask me if I wanted to do the podcast, is because it's interesting. How can we? It's part of the thing that earlier, we talked about. How do we get interest in Montreal for a cause that in Sierra Leone, which a lot of people have never heard of or they don't know
Right.
much about. So that's for us, that's a big victory. If we can raise awareness in the right way and get people interested and more knowledgeable about what's going on, and then possibly even getting them to contribute actively, then that's a big victory. I mean, it's not just commercial success in the end. It's just getting those pieces in place.
Absolutely. I've kept you on for a long time, man. We're gonna wrap it up. Just last thing, because I saw that I think it was I can't remember if it was on your Instagram or I can't remember where I saw it. There were some pictures with Jane Goodall. Uh,
Yeah.
Tell me about this incredible person that I'm assuming you got to meet and that has had such a huge impact. Uh,
She's she's amazing. Yeah, well, she stayed with us for 3 days. Spent a lot of times with her. Uh, had a lot of drinks with her. I mean, she's into scotch, and I remember we had a lot of nights where a couple of drinks, and she's. I mean, she leaves you speechless in the end. I mean, you realize she's 85 now. She's still pushing forward to get things done because she realizes that, from a selfish point of view, she's running out of time and there's so much still to do. But when you talk to her, I mean, she's a celebrity in many ways. I mean, there's films about her, and she's been received by dignitaries, and she's given talks at Davos and the Economic Forum there, and all of this stuff. And then when you talk to her, you don't realize that any of that. She's just that young Jane who went to Tanzania when she was young, trying to discover herself and trying to find her way. She's still at that level, George. And the things that she talks about is I mean, it's remarkable. And I mean, there's a lot of respect there, and there's a lot of support there. I speak to her from time to time. Still, we've kept in touch. She lives in the UK. She's not that far away from where I am now. So when things go back to normal, probably go see her and have a scotch or something. But you know what I say to people, George, is basically, guys, people like Jane and Bala, the founder of the sanctuary, they've sacrificed their entire lives to get these things in motion and get things done. But if you really look at it from at the core, you don't need many people sacrificing their lives.
yeah.
You've got people already doing that. You've got people like Greta. I mean, she's young, but she's got a whole career in front of her, and she's sacrificed a lot. All we need is people doing small, incremental, volunteering here and there, supporting the causes, getting that sort of understanding of what's required. That's what it requires, and that's what I learned from her. It doesn't take, the sacrifice to that level. It's just doing your part.
Dude, I'm gonna let you go. I know you're a busy guy. I don't even know how to describe it, dude. I mean, it's been so long, and I'm just so happy that I got to see you again and to just chat. And I'm very proud of the stuff that you're doing. Whenever you appeared on social media and I started following, I was very impressed, man. And I'm glad that you found your way there. And it's amazing. It was amazing to talk to you.
George, when I saw the message come through, I got emotional, and I showed the message to my partner Holly, and I said, "Look, I mean, that sort of proved that it's come full circle, and I feel comfortable about myself and happy that
Yeah.
I get to I've reached a level where I'm comfortable talking about these things, and I appreciate it, George. It means a lot to support, and thanks for sending that message. It means a lot.
Any plans on coming back to Montreal soon for a visit?
I haven't been back. Yeah, I haven't been back for 2 years, but I'm hoping to get the vaccine in the next month or two, and then maybe July, August. So when I come, yeah, I'll come see you in person.
Yeah, man, absolutely. All right, buddy. Take good care of yourself. We'll talk soon.
And you, and say hi to everyone there. Say hi to Ginny, Peter, everyone there.
I will, man. I will. Take care, buddy.
Thanks.